Welcome back, learner. You know, here in the archives, we like to crack open those books that maybe make other people a little bit nervous.
Those books that have collected dust for centuries, yeah. Books of magic and mystery, the ones that people whisper about. Grimoires,
Yeah.
ancient texts. We dive in and see what secrets are tucked away inside.
Today's deep dive, we're looking into gypsy shadows,
Yeah.
uncovering the secret magic and fortune-telling lore of the Romani people.
Should be a fascinating one, The Learner. We'll be unpacking a whole collection of customs and ceremonies, really looking at their traditions, fortune-telling, of course,
Yeah.
but also what some might call witch doctoring, love charms, and other forms of, well, sorcery.
And we're drawing our information from some lesser-known works, and what's really interesting, personal experiences. We'll get those first-hand accounts. It's a glimpse into a world that's, well, not often seen.
And it's a world, you have to remember, that was changing rapidly even as these accounts were being collected.
Hmm.
Think about it. Back then, folklore was just starting to be taken seriously as a field of study.
Right. Moving beyond just those romantic stories and into some serious scholarship, people were trying to understand the actual truth, or at least a deeper truth, behind what was often called, magic.
And remember, this is a time of huge scientific advancements, too. Hypnotism was being explored. New understandings of memory were emerging. That definitely colored how people saw these traditions.
Absolutely. And there was this real urgency to record everything, to get it all down before it was lost.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Traditional beliefs, they were disappearing fast as, general education spread and culture shifted. People realized that if they didn't talk to people directly, get those firsthand stories, a lot of that knowledge would vanish.
It's like they were racing against time, trying to capture something that was, well, that was fading away.
In a way, they were. And what I find fascinating is that even with science pushing forward, the fascination with magic, with the unknown, didn't disappear.
In some ways, it even grew. Our sources, they talk about how even scientists were getting pulled into this realm of marvel and mystery. It's almost like the more we tried to explain the world, the more we realized how much we didn't know. All right, the learner, let's start by thinking about where these beliefs come from.
Well, one theory is that those early ideas about the supernatural, the very beginnings of mythology, they just naturally spring up in the human mind,
Hmm.
especially in childhood.
That makes sense. When you're a kid, everything's new and a little bit scary, the dark, strange noises. Easy to see how that could turn into stories about spirits and magic.
Precisely. And our sources even mention that the Romani people, their appearance, sometimes their very gaze,
Mm.
could be seen as, well, otherworldly by those who weren't familiar with them.
Yeah, they talk about that wild Indian gypsy look and how when excited, their eyes like a demon. For someone who already believed in magic, that could easily confirm their suspicions.
And it goes even deeper than that. Some suggested that the human brain might actually have a part that's, for lack of a better term, ghost-making, evolved right alongside language, meaning that creating supernatural beliefs, it might be something we're hardwired to do.
So we have this tendency towards the supernatural, and then we encounter people who seem to fit those beliefs perfectly. It's a recipe for some incredible stories and traditions. Speaking of which, let's dive into some of those beliefs. We got to talk about butts. What exactly are these?
But the learner, these are malevolent spirits in the Indian context, at least how they're described in our sources. And they're old, pre-Aryan, non-Vedic, meaning their origins go back further than some of the major Indian religions.
So not just any old spirits, then.
No, not at all. And the sources, they actually compare these beliefs to voodoo. Like there's a similar understanding across cultures of these unseen forces that could cause, well, all sorts of trouble.
And the gurus, the spiritual advisors, they came into play here, right?
Yes. Gurus. They were believed to have the ability to not just see these boots, but actually control them, use them for good or for evil.
Okay, so on the one hand, they could heal, they could protect. But on the other,
On the other hand, they could cause illness, even death. And let's be honest, some of them use this power for, well, for their own benefit. Imagine you can essentially control people's fears. You can offer protection from something they believe is very real, very dangerous. Makes for a pretty good living, unfortunately.
and our sources, they don't shy away from giving some pretty stark examples of this. Kalu and Kasi, Akuti and Balu, those stories are, well, they're not for the faint of heart.
No, they're not. Kolu and Kasi, you see, that's a case where a guru is actually paid to use boots to harm Kasi,
Yeah.
leading to his death. And then you have Akuti and Balu, where the guru is playing both sides, pretending to help both of them while actually just looking out for himself. It shows just how much power these figures could wield.
It's like a supernatural protection racket, isn't it? You pay, you get protection. You don't pay, well, who knows what might happen.
A chilling thought, isn't it? But what's really interesting is how these beliefs, these Indian beliefs, tie into the sorcery attributed to the Romani people in Europe.
That's what I was wondering. Is there a connection there?
Our sources, they suggest there might be a historical link, potentially going back to those ancient Chaldean and Etrurian practices.
Wow, that's going way back.
It is. And the idea is that as the Romani migrated across Europe, they kind of stepped into that role of the guru. They brought with them their own beliefs about spirits, about magic, and it resonated with the existing European folklore.
So even though the names might have changed, the basic concept remained.
Exactly. European Roma, they believed in these spirits too, though they might have called them by different names, names that fit into their local traditions. And they had their own methods for dealing with them: herbs, smoke, and rituals, of course. Lots of rituals.
Like trying to trap the spirits in trees or streams?
Yes, or sometimes just asking them politely to leave, find somewhere else to haunt.
And it wasn't just the poorest or the most isolated people who believed in these things.
No, not at all. Even people from higher social classes, they would seek out the Romani, particularly the wise women, for help with these spiritual matters.
It seems like these beliefs were really woven into the fabric of society.
They were, and they went beyond just those broad ideas about good and evil spirits. The Roma also had very specific charms and conjurations for dealing with everyday problems, especially illness.
Okay, so let's get into some of those specifics. Our deep dive goes on to talk about all sorts of charms, but it seems like there's a particular focus on Hungarian Romani magic for fevers.
Fevers, yes. And they didn't just have one cure-all either. They differentiated between different types of fevers, each with its own specific remedy.
So like they had a whole system of understanding how fevers worked?
It seems that way. They had shillelagh, which were chills, and then tate shillelagh, which was a much stronger fever, often with those shaking chills we associate with really bad illnesses.
And each of those had its set of cures.
That's right. For shillelagh, they had a rather unusual remedy using frog lungs and liver.
Frog lungs.
Yes. They would dry them, powder them, and then it would be, ingested, often mixed with some spirits. It might sound strange to us, but it shows just how important natural ingredients were to their healing practices.
I guess when you're dealing with the unknown, you turn to what you know, nature. And what about Techilali, the more serious fever?
That one involved a ritual with a young tree performed at sunrise.
At sunrise. Okay, so there's already a sense of timing, ritual to this.
There is. The person with the fever, they would go to this young tree just as the sun was coming up, and they would shake the tree, shake it hard. And while they were doing that, they would recite a charm.
Can you get us that charm?
It went like this: Shillelagh, Shillelagh pregia katha tubisha, which means fever, fever, go away. Here shalt thou stay. Here shalt thou stay. The idea seems to be to transfer the fever, the shaking, into the tree.
So like the tree is absorbing the illness from the person.
That seems to be the underlying principle.
Yeah.
And this idea of using trees to take on illness, it pops up again and again in their traditions.
Like it wasn't just a one-off thing.
No, not at all. They even had a way to vaccinate trees against fever. You would bore a hole in the tree, spit into it 3 times, say the fever spell, and then plug up the hole. It's like they were trying to protect the tree itself from getting sick.
And there's also the belief about the cuckoo bird. That hearing the first cuckoo of spring meant a year of illness unless you did something about it.
Yes. You had to go to a tree 9 different times, and each time you'd bore a hole and spit into it 3 times. It was a way to ward off the bad luck associated with the cuckoo song.
That's a lot of spitting.
It is. But these rituals, they weren't just about the physical actions. They were about the words, the intentions. They were about connecting with something larger than yourself.
I can see that. There's a real sense of ceremony to all of this.
Definitely. And some of these rituals were even more complex. There's one for fever that involves a knife, an unused knife, and going to the bank of a stream before sunrise.
Okay, this one sounds interesting. Tell us more.
So you take this knife and you dig a hole in the stream bank. And then the person with the fever, they urinate into the hole, fill it back up with earth, and then they say a special charm.
A charm specifically for this.
That's right. It goes, Shillelagh echkate na ava kiamanche suchara anzrechik, Avakiamanje kanakate na hinpanye, which means, fever stay here. Do not come to me, dry up in dust, come unto me when no water is here. And the last part there, when no water is here, it means when there is no more water in the river. Like they're emphasizing that this is permanent.
The fever is banished, gone.
Exactly. And there's another one that involves taking a kreutzer, a small coin, an egg, and some salt, and going to a crossroads before sunrise.
Okay, that one sounds a bit more familiar, like something out of a classic fairy tale.
It does, doesn't it? And you throw these things backwards over your shoulder while saying, Preja, 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 kia misa sheske, akodoi, trianda sapa, da saventut, trianda juklatut tuncheren, trianda kasnatut chunavan.
What does that mean?
It means, be gone, be gone, be gone, to the evil one, stay there. May 30 snakes devour thee, 30 dogs tear thee, 30 cocks swallow thee.
So, like, they're sending the fever to the devil and asking all these creatures to destroy it.
That's the idea. And then they would take a black hen, slaughter it, cut it open, and boil it.
A black hen. That's interesting. There's a lot of folklore around black hens.
There is. And they're often associated with, well, with the darker side of magic.
Yeah.
The source even points out that black hens were expensive, so sometimes people would use cheaper substitutes. But the symbolism, it was still there.
Right. So they'd boil this black hen, and then...
The person with the fever, they had to drink water from 3 different springs or rivulets, and every day, 9 times a day, they'd throw wood onto a fire.
9 times a day. That's quite a commitment.
It is. But it shows how seriously they took these rituals, how much they believed in their power.
Okay, so lots of fever cures. What about headaches? Did they have anything for those?
They did. The Transylvanian Roma, they had a simpler approach. They would either rub the head with vinegar or wash it with hot water.
And while they were doing that?
They would recite this charm. O Duke Andro, Maroshiro, Dotad Mise Cicero, Adada Dikel Akana, Man Tumajusta Mardias, Miro Shiro tu Mardias, Tuna Achtu Andre Mediatu, Jatu Jake, Kaetu Mise Suchides Odoi Sikoves, Kojal Promero Ushalin, Adaleske Idukin.
That's quite a mouthful. What's it all about?
It basically translates to, O pain in my head, the father of all evil, look upon thee now. Thou hast greatly pained me. Thou tormentest my head. Remain not in me. Go thou, go home, whence thou, evil one, didst suck. Thither hasten. Who treads upon my shadow, to him be the pain.
So they're addressing the pain itself as if it's a separate being, an evil being.
Exactly. They're not just trying to dull the pain. They're trying to drive it out, send it back to where it came from.
And hair. Hair seems to have played an important role in their magic, both for protection and for causing harm.
It did. If you found a stray hair on your clothes, that could be a sign someone was trying to do you harm through witchcraft. And the way to counter that was to burn the hair, destroy it.
So it's not just about the hair itself. It's about what it represents, that connection to the person who might be trying to do you harm.
Precisely. And they could also use hair to harm their enemies. They'd take hair from their enemy, soak it in their own bodily fluids, and then throw it on the enemy's clothes. It was a way to get close to them, to affect them directly.
Yeah, that's pretty intense.
It is. And the source points out that in Tuscan magic, particularly those charms aimed at enemies, they often used, well, pretty disgusting things. Like there's a real emphasis on the unpleasant, the repulsive.
It's like they're trying to make the magic itself as foul as their intentions.
Perhaps. And hair also played a role in love magic. If a wife wanted to make her husband love her more, she might take some of her hair and some of his hair and bind them together under the full moon. Do that 3 times, and supposedly it would strengthen their bond.
Okay, that one's a bit more romantic.
It is. But then there are others that are, well, a bit more unsettling, like the one where a maid wants to make a young man fall in love with her.
What does she do?
She would take some of her hair, mix it with dirt from his footprints, and this is where it gets a bit strange, saliva from a female dog in heat.
Saliva from a dog in heat. Okay, that's taking it to another level.
It is. And then they'd burn this mixture to ash and try to get the young man to eat it. The source mentions that dirt from footprints, it's actually pretty common in love magic, both Italian and even ancient sorcery.
So, like, it's about capturing their essence, their very being.
That's the idea. And even something as simple as a baby tooth, a lost baby tooth, it had its own set of rituals.
Baby teeth, what do they do with those?
Well, the first tooth that fell out, you would throw it into a hollow tree. teeth lost in the 7th year, you'd keep those.
Hmm.
And if the child got a toothache, you'd throw one of those saved teeth into a stream.
So like you're sending the toothache away with the tooth.
Exactly. And they even used teeth that had been buried for a long time to make a kind of fetish. They'd mix them with bones from a tree frog, sew them into a bag, and then if you rub that bag over merchandise, it was supposed to help you sell it.
That's quite a range of beliefs, from curing fevers to boosting sales.
It is. And it shows just how deeply these magical ideas were embedded in their daily lives. Everything had a meaning, a connection to the unseen world.
And speaking of connections, our deep dive then moves on to the lore surrounding the elder tree.
The elder tree.
Yes.
It was a very important symbol. People believed you could bury your sins, your sorrows, under its roots.
So like the tree itself would absorb them.
That's the idea. And there's a Romani incantation that supposedly transfers disease from the tree's bark into the earth and then ultimately to death. It's like they're sending the illness back to its source.
And it wasn't just the Roma who held the elder tree in such high regard.
No, the old Germans, they called it Frau Elhorn, which suggests they saw it as being inhabited by a female spirit,
Yeah.
maybe an elf.
A tree spirit, that's a very old belief found across many cultures.
It is, and in some places, peasants wouldn't even cut down an elder tree without first kneeling and praying to it, like asking for its permission.
So it wasn't just a source of medicine or magic. It was almost a being in its own right.
Exactly, and it had protective qualities too. Hanging an elder branch by a stable door was supposed to ward off witches, and if you planted an elder tree near your house, it would keep evil spirits away.
And what about the elder twigs growing on graves?
Ah, those were a sign that the person buried there was happy in the afterlife.
A good omen, then.
A good omen. And there's also a strong connection between the elder tree and witches. One book on the witch ride, it lists elder as one of the 9 herbs used by witches.
9 herbs. Is there any significance to that number?
It's hard to say for sure, but 9, it does pop up quite a bit in folklore and mythology.
And people would make wreaths out of elder branches, hoping to see witches on All-Purges Night.
That's right. And there's even a story about someone seeing witches using elder branches to churn butter on a rooftop. Though the source who tells that story, he doesn't quite believe it himself.
A bit too fantastical, perhaps.
Perhaps. But the connection to witchcraft, it's definitely there. Even the word Hollander, the German word for elder, it can be linked to hol, which means hollow, or seen as an anagram of unholden, which means unholy spirits.
So the elder tree, protective, but also connected to the darker side of magic.
It seems that way. And then there's straw, seemingly ordinary straw, but it also has its place in Romani, in European folklore.
Straw. What kind of magic is there in straw?
Well, there's a charm that involves laying straws on a table by an open window under the full moon, ideally on a Saturday night, and you say a certain rhyme, and supposedly those straws will turn into dancing fairies.
Dancing fairies. That's a bit more whimsical than some of the other things we've talked about.
It is. And witches, they were said to make figures out of straw and then bring them to life.
Straw men coming to life. That's a classic image.
It is. And like the hollow stems of the elder tree, the hollow stalks of straw, were also believed to be home to small fairies.
So there's this idea of hidden spaces, secret places where magic resides.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
But straw wasn't always associated with good things. In Germany, if you wanted to insult someone, really insult them, you'd strew chopped straw in front of their house, particularly in front of a bride's house. It was supposed to hinder the marriage, to bring bad luck.
Wow, that's taken things pretty far.
It is. And it was taken so seriously that they actually had laws against it. People were genuinely afraid of the power of this seemingly simple act.
Okay, so we've got trees, we've got straw, we've got all sorts of ingredients and rituals. But our deep dive also talks about something even more fundamental, the power of words themselves.
The power of words, yes. There's a fascinating section about how just saying certain words, especially repeated mysterious words, could have a real effect on people, particularly if they were sick.
Like the placebo effect.
In a way, yes, but it goes deeper than that. There's an example given of the willows, a type of woolly caterpillar that people were really afraid of. Just touching it was supposed to be dangerous.
A caterpillar? Why a caterpillar?
Well, caterpillars transform, don't they? They go from this crawling creature to something completely different, a butterfly, a moth. It's a symbol of change, of metamorphosis. And in some cultures, those kinds of transformations were, well, They were seen as being connected to magic.
And there's a specific spell for protection against the willows.
There is. It's a Malo-Russian spell recorded by Professor Dragomanov. And it's quite beautiful, actually. It invokes a holy figure, asking them to free the sick person from fever.
So like they're connecting the caterpillar, the willows, to the fever itself.
Exactly. And this idea of a small worm-like creature having supernatural power, it's not unique to this region either. The source mentions that the Algonquin people, they believed in a kind of worm that could turn into a dragon, a sorcerer, or even a spirit.
So like it had this hidden potential, this power that could be unleashed.
That's it. And the wulos, it's similar. It's not just a caterpillar. It's a symbol of something much bigger, something that can cause illness, but also potentially heal it.
And they had a specific incantation for invoking the wulos to help someone who was sick.
They did. It's quite a long one. And it addresses the wulos as if it were a holy being, saying that God himself is calling it to his dwelling. It then commands the wulos to leave the sick person alone, to stop causing them harm. And it asks for the Mother of God's help in driving it away.
So they're not just asking for the willows to go away, they're appealing to higher powers as well.
Yes, it's a blend of different beliefs, different traditions, and it ends with a very powerful banishment, sending the willows to a place where it can never return. And it wishes for the sick person to be completely healed, attributing the cure to God.
It's a fascinating mix of magic and religion.
It is. And that mix, it pops up a lot in these beliefs. It's not always a clear separation between the two.
Our deep dive then moves on to talk about Herodias and snake charms. Now, Herodias, that's a name with some serious biblical baggage.
She is. And the source actually points out that in some traditions, she's identified with Lilith. You know, Lilith, the figure from Jewish folklore who's associated with demons and evil spirits.
So, like, they're taking this figure from the Bible and layering even more darkness onto her.
It seems that way. And what's really interesting is that Italian witches, they claim to worship both Diana, the Roman goddess, and Herodias.
Diana and Herodias, that's a strange pairing.
It is, but it shows how these different belief systems, they could blend and merge in unexpected ways.
And they had specific exorcisms for snakes.
Yes. They had one that was supposed to work against 60 and a half kinds of beasts that creep on the earth. And it's very specific. It mentions the serpent of evil, and then it lists all these different types of snakes.
60 and a half? Why half a kind?
That's a good question. Maybe there was a creature they couldn't quite classify, so they just added it on as a half.
It adds to the mystery, doesn't it? And anyone who was bitten by a snake, if they carried this prayer with them, they'd be protected.
That's what they believed.
Yeah.
And the source, they even make a connection between this and the biblical story of Paul and the viper.
Paul and the viper. Remind me how that one goes.
Paul is shipwrecked on an island and a viper bites him, but he shakes it off and he's fine. And the source suggests that this might be related to Aesculapius.
Aesculapius, the Greek god of healing. He was associated with snakes, wasn't he?
He was. So maybe there's a connection there. Maybe the snake isn't just a dangerous creature. Maybe it's also a symbol of healing, of transformation.
Okay, so snakes can be good or bad, depending on the context. What about toothaches? Does it have any charms for those?
They did. There's a spell for the toothache that reads like a prayer. It tells the story of St. Peter crying because of a toothache and Jesus coming to him and commanding the worm inside the tooth to come out.
A worm inside the tooth, that's a very old belief, isn't it?
It is. It goes back to a time when people didn't understand what caused toothaches, so they blame it on worms or other creatures.
And as soon as the worm comes out, Peter's pain is gone.
Exactly. And then Peter asks Jesus to make it so that anyone who carries these words with him will never have a toothache. And Jesus, he grants the request.
It's like a biblical fairy tale. And the source mentions that there's a similar English charm, so it's not just a Romani belief.
No. This idea of appealing to holy figures for healing, it's found across many different cultures.
And they had a charm for nosebleeds, too.
Yes. This one involves Zechariah, the biblical figure who was killed in the temple. And the charm, it says that when he was killed, his blood turned to stone. And then it commands the nosebleed to stop, invoking the power of the Savior and the priests who perform the liturgy.
So again, they're drawing on religious figures and stories for their magic.
They are. And it shows how how intertwined those two things were for them. It wasn't always a clear separation.
All right, and we need to talk about the weird sisters because those words, they often conjure up images of scary witches, you know?
Right, but the source actually points out that the word weird, it didn't originally mean frightening.
It didn't. What did it mean then?
It had to do with fate, with destiny. It comes from old words meaning to become or to shape fate.
So the weird sisters, they weren't called that because they were scary. They were called that because they could see the future.
Exactly. They were the ones who controlled fate, who could see what was to come.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. And there's also a story about the Athenians, isn't there? About how they stoned a woman for using magic words.
Yes, they believed that true healing power, it came from physical things, herbs, stones, animals, not from words themselves.
It's like they were afraid of the power of language, of the things that could be done with words.
It's possible. And this fear of magic, of the unknown, it runs through a lot of these beliefs.
Speaking of which, our deep dive then moves on to fortune telling, and there's a young woman from Tuscan Romania who uses cards to tell fortune.
Yes. And before she would use these invocations almost like prayers, like she was calling on something to help her see the truth.
Can you give us an example?
One of them goes like this. 25 carte siete. 25 diavoli diventerete. Diventerete anderete nel corpo, nel sangue, nell'anima, nel sentimenti del corpo. Del mio amante non posso vivere, non passa stare né bere, né mangiare né con uomini né con donne non passa favelare. Finché alla porta di casa mia, non viene picchia.
Wow, that's pretty intense. What does it all mean?
It's basically a command to the cards to turn into devils and to go into her lover's body, his blood, his soul, his very feelings, to make him so obsessed with her that he can't live without her, can't eat, can't drink, can't even talk to anyone else until he comes to her door.
So it's love magic, but taken to a whole other level.
It is. And it shows how powerful they believed these rituals, these words could be.
Okay, let's move on from love for a moment and talk about children because our deep dive then shifts to talking about Romani magic and children. And there's this fascinating belief about birth order.
Birth order, yes. The belief is that the last of 7 daughters, if there are no sons born in between, she'll have the gift of second sight, meaning she can see things that others can't. Hidden treasures, spirits, that sort of thing.
7 daughters? That's a lot of daughters.
It is. And the same belief was held about the 9th son in a family of all boys.
So, like, there's something special about those particular